What is up, guys? My name is Jay Diesel, and today I'm going to be doing a deck tech on my historic blue-white control deck. I have recently played about 105 games with this deck in the historic best of one format with a 63% win rate, which I feel was pretty strong. The deck felt very, very good to me, and I wanted to kind of present my own best of one take on the blue-white archetype. And I think this deck is very well positioned, and it's got a couple unusual choices, which I actually think position it very well going forward as I make the push into Mythic. So, talking a little bit about my list here. For early game removal, I do 2 Baffling Ends and 2 Glass Caskets. I kind of take the even split here. We're running 3 Censors. I like the early game, Force Spike effect. You need to have interaction on turn 2 to either slow down an aggressive deck, disrupt something like Tibalt's Trickery or whatever else. It can be really strong. I run one Jwari Disruption just for the 4th effect, but also to give me an additional land drop if I need it. I found the card to be fairly lacking. This is one of the cards that would be on my chopping block personally. One for Search for Azcanta gives you late game inevitability. It's just a really strong effect to drop early. 2 Dovin's Veto. I like to have the hard counters, the ability to kind of have a stopgap that I know they're not going to be able to interfere with, especially in control matchups. Incredibly, incredibly strong. And I run 1 Containment Priest. A lot of blue-white players have resorted to running like 2 main deck Grafdigger's cages in order to be able to deal with things like goblins, Coco, and the like. I went for Containment Priest. I think it works well, especially with all of the 2-mana plays that we have. And it's not a completely dead card. I've actually had this card overperform for me. A lot of the times I'm sniping, early 1 drops. A lot of people just aren't expecting blue-white to be putting a single body on board. Granted, this card does turn on their removal, but as a one-of, I don't think it's that much of a downside. Moving into the 3 slots here, I opt for 2 Omens of the Sun. A little bit of life gain. The extra 2 1/1 bodies can be really good. This buys you a lot of time, especially if you're playing against something like red-green. Helping you get to your Wraths is going to be extremely important. 2 Narsets, this is pretty standard. Helps deny card draw. The ability to dig 4 cards deep, very powerful. 1 Dovin. This is a little bit of personal flair. I happen to really like this card. I think it's good against mono red. It can also be decent against combo decks, especially anything with a sort of Eggsy in terms of cycling using artifacts. Can be really powerful, just that small taxing effect. Gives you a little bit more game also against the colorless ramp decks. Just being able to delay them even by a turn can be helpful. Does kind of fall off late game. When we get up to the 4 drops. Now this is where, for me, this what defines the deck. Is 2 cast out standard catch-all removal. This is really important to be able to hit artifacts, enchantments, planeswalkers, instant speed's really good. Blow out Never Cleave mid-combat. 1 Wrath of God. So if you look, I have 3 Doomskars. I went with a 3-1 split. I do prefer Doomskar because the ability to Wrath on turn 3 in best of 1 is so incredibly important. There's a lot of games against specifically elves and green-red, where if you are not wiping the board on turn 3, you're going to lose. And Wrath of God is a little too slow, but I actually didn't want 4 Doomskar, and so I went with the 1 of Wrath of God, and I found it to be pretty reasonable. 4 Behold the Multiverse. So originally when I was building this deck, I kind of wanted to see how good the Foretell mechanic was going to be in the blue-white shell. It has felt really good to me. I feel like Behold can be a little bit clunky just because Foretell really wants you to tap out on your turn. And obviously the interaction with Teferi is cute. You can plus Teferi, untap 2 lands end of turn, hold priority, and Foretell one of your cards. But that does tap you out and let your opponent know they can push the advantage. We have 2 Karn the Great Creator. So this personally has been my answer to a lot of the metagame. And I think this is one of the most powerful cards that is not getting as much play as it should in best of 1. Karn's ability to tutor 1 of 15 silver bullets for nearly any matchup to give you play when you really shouldn't have a chance is already incredibly powerful. But his static ability to shut off artifacts hits so many things incidentally in this format, such as it prevents your opponent from equipping an Embercleave on board, shuts down Bomat Courier, which is becoming more popular with Death Shadow, Shuts down artifact ramp decks, which are, historically very hard for blue-white to beat. And it goes ahead and turns off Oven from sacrifice decks. And these are just a couple of the things that it hits. Also gives you play against artifact combo decks, while at the same time also being able to animate some of those things you tutor out of your sideboard to now act as pressure for opposing planeswalkers by either animating glass caskets or maybe a spyglass that no longer has a target to just kind of help keep that board pressure going. And on top of that, the synergy with Elspeth's Conqueror's Death to get it back and then continue tutoring targets out of your sideboard really makes this such a unique threat for this deck. We already talked about Doomskar here. For Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, this is your bread and butter. This is why you play blue-white control. It is such an immensely powerful card. If you resolve it on an empty board, you are so far ahead. Your opponent's not going to come back the majority of the time. And the ability to leverage that 2 mana into more advantage, whether it's with, foretelling, casting Behold, holding up counter spells, gives you so much tempo, puts you so far ahead. The tuck ability is also relevant, just being able to delay a permanent until you're better able to deal with it. I could go on and on about how good Teferi is. Elspeth Conqueror's Death, I really, really like this card. It's possible that's a little bit too slow and I should cut it down to 1 with how slow the deck already is. But the ability to exile a 3 is really relevant. You have targets out of basically every deck. You can hit Anax in mono red. You can hit Embercleave in green red. You have so many targets. Take out a Questing Beast, In control matchups, the ability to just get cards back, even making non-creature spells cost 2 more, can buy you so much time. Overall, I've really been happy with ECD. A little lacking against sacrifice decks, but we already have so much game against them, I'm not particularly worried. You go to our land split here. I'm running 2 Castle Vantress, 1 Ardent Veil. This can obviously be adjusted. I know a lot of people like 3 Vantress, 2 Ardent Veil. I'm happy with my current split right now. A lot of the time, I have plenty of things to do with my mana. I'm not relying on my land super heavily. Playing the blue-white cycling land for 2 is probably a good idea. I'd probably play it over Temple of Enlightenment. There's a couple ways you can tweak the mana base. I've been more or less happy with this. I think 25 lands is the way to go. I also run 1 Jwari Disruption. So I think that 25-26 range is about right for the type of deck that we're playing. And now let's go ahead and get into the Karn board. I'm going to go over each one of my choices for the board and explain why that particular card is here. Some of these cards are going to look a little weird. So currently, I am running 1 Ornithopter. I know your first thought is, why are you running Ornithopter? It is an O2. There are a lot of situations you end up in where you really need to be able to develop your Karn, but your card's going to die immediately and not really get much value. And I think the ability to go get Ornithopter and play card on 4, tutor Ornithopter out of the sideboard and have it defend that turn is incredibly powerful. You can obviously use Stonecoil Serpent, but a lot of the time I don't need the extra win con. I have more than enough ways to win the game. I just need that very specific 0 mana, I need to block a guy for a turn effect, and Ornithopter fits that bill. I run 1 Grafdigger's Cage, and this really could be bumped up to 2, as this card is an absolute all-star and has so many uses in a bunch of matchups across the historic metagame. It shuts down Muxus out of Goblins, it affects Coco decks like Elves. Against Sacrifice, it shuts down almost everything. You've got Woe Strider it prevents, Luris, Kroxa from being escaped, Cat, and Dreadhorde Arcanist as well. On top of that, it also hates on combo decks like Tybalt's Trickery, which heavily relies on Genesis Ultimatum or pulling out an Ulamog, and other combo decks like Neoform. Overall, Grafdiggers is an incredibly flexible card and affects so many matchups, and the ability to pull it out of the sideboard is one of the big things that makes Karn such an impactful tool. Next up is Amulet of Safekeeping. This is a bit of an odd card, but it has a very unique effect in that it gives creature tokens -1/-0. This can be good against decks like Mono Red. It can be good against odd token strategies such as Polymorph. Just the ability to mass shut off tokens for the rest of the game. Young Pyromancer, Black-Red decks, also very good there. Decks where maybe a Ratchet Bomb that I can detonate once isn't going to be enough, and I actually need to be able to deal with multiple waves of tokens. This card can be quite good. The initial effect is also a little tacked on, but this can be good in the mono red matchup, where maybe, it takes an extra mana or two over the course of a game for them to be able to bolt my face. This can kind of constrict their options, and overall, it is a small card, but it does have a couple great applications. One Mazemind Tome. I actually haven't had much cause to get this card. Most of the situations I'm in, you're looking for almost a parity-like board state where there's nothing going on, but odds are I'm pushing my advantage if I have Karn on board already. So this card really doesn't get tutored a lot. I think it's actually one of the weaker cards in this board. Then we have Ratchet Bomb. This is a nice catch-all. The ability to clear off a bunch of tokens can also be good against blue-white auras. Decks that just load up a lot of 1s and 0s. I run 2 Sorcerous Spyglasses. This is a phenomenal tech card out of the board. The ability to name multiple Planeswalkers to shut down something like an Aetherworks Marvel or other threat that has an activated ability. It is so flexible. Definitely would not run less than 2. And the information on your opponent's hand can also be really vital. Next up is Chaos Wand. Now, this is a bit of a pet card of mine, but it's actually quite good in the control matchups. This is a great way to use your opponent's large effects against them. I've played this against blue-white control. I've played this against Grixis control. I've also used this against ultimatum decks. The ability to kind of spin the wheel, hit a powerful card draw spell, a counter spell if you activate it when they have something on the stack, or just to be able to use the removal out of their own deck to help shut down their threats as they try to pressure your planeswalkers. This card has a multitude of uses. Granted, they're all at random. Cosmos Elixir. So this is one of the most recent additions to the deck, courtesy of Kaldheim. The only time I ever really get it out is against mono red. This card will help you stabilize if you're sitting in like that 5 to 6 health range. You've both exhausted a lot of resources. Gaining 2 life a turn can be pretty darn powerful. And in control matchups, this can also be a decent card to go get. Just the ability to draw an extra card every turn because you're really not losing much life. 1 Solem Simulacrum. These are for the situations where you need to ramp a little bit more. You're kind of behind. You just need to put a body on board. But you have enough mana that you don't have to rely on the Ornithopter Desperation Plan. Solemn, just a solid card. Cataclysmic Gearhulk. So this is one of the other big reasons to have a Karn board. This card has overperformed for me. The ability to tutor a Wrath out of your board with Karn is so incredibly strong. This card is also an absolute mirror breaker in the blue-white control matchup. In blue-white control, there is often a lot of artifact and enchantment-based removal just kind of floating around on the board, and the ability to make your opponent sack down to 1 either ends up freeing creatures, giving you 3/3 dinosaurs. Great against wide boards. Really happy with this card. Circle of Loyalty. This is a close out the game type of card. I rarely fetch it. Can be good against obvious control decks if they don't have a way to remove it. You generate knights every turn, tax the resources. 1 God-Pharaoh statue. This is a great card against eggs. Any type of cycling control, artifact deck, combo deck. This card will tax their mana. Also great against mana-screwed opponents. There are plenty of games where your opponent will be stuck with like 3 or 4 lands. You'll have a Karn, you're ahead, you're hitting your land drops because you have a high land count. You go get God-Pharaoh statue, you drop it, you just go, all right, opponent, you're going to play maybe 1 spell a turn for the rest of the game, and they just lose. Meteor Golem, always play at least 1. The ability to go ahead and just destroy any permanent is extremely flexible. 7 mana obviously is a lot, but I think this effect is very strong. And finally, the Piece de Resistance, Platinum Angel. Now, a lot of people look at this card and they go, why are you playing this? This is, 7 mana, it's pretty niche. This card will single-handedly win you games you have no business winning. So, one of the biggest annoyances in Best of 1 is blue-white auras. That deck has absolutely no way to remove a Platinum Angel once in play, and I have more than once tutored for Platinum Angel, just stalled the game out to 7 mana, played Platinum Angel, and done nothing the rest of the game. None of the other cards in my deck matter. They have no way to remove it. Elves is another deck that cannot kill you if you play Platinum Angel. Goblins have Trash Master, so you're not going to fetch it against them. They also have Gem Palm, so not super great against them. This card has won me so many games. I actually want to go ahead and take a second to talk about some of the matchups and go over some of the win-loss data I have with this deck. As you can see here, I played 105 games, 63% win rate, Pretty respectable on the play, 66, on the draw, 60. A lot of the times, this just has to do with the fact that a lot of your interaction, your sensors, your glass caskets, being on the play allows you to deploy them in such a manner where you're going to catch their 2-drop, being able to force spike their 2-drop, or develop proactively, or foretell that Doomskar on 2, and then deploy it the next turn after they go Burning Tree Emissary, Robber of the Rich. It really makes a big difference. As you can see here, the matchups that are hardest for this deck. First up, red-green. Red-green's going to be really tough for you. This is a complete toss-up. If they go first, and they go Burning Tree into insert a 2-drop, you are probably going to lose if you didn't go first and foretell Doomskar. That is just the reality of it. Their deck is very, very well positioned against you. They have a lot of hasty threats. And Embercleave. Embercleave is a very tough card for you. They're going to get a lot of bodies on board. They're going to move quickly. They're going to get underneath of you. And as soon as you tap out for a Wrath, they're going to go ahead and collect a company, and they're going to blow you out. A very hard matchup to navigate. Mono red here. This is going to be Goblins most of the time. Goblins, another very difficult matchup. If you want to shore up your matchup against Goblins, you could always add in another Containment Priest. You could maybe add in a 4th Censor. You would obviously cut Karn if you actually want to be good against Goblins. Just put 2 Grafdigger's cages in. But I feel like you lose enough percentage points in other matchups that it's not really worth it. Black-red, this is just going to be Sacrifice / Young Pyromancer tokens. We're really well positioned against this deck. The ability to later get Karn, go get Grafdigger's Cage. We have Omen of the Sun, which is actually really strong against them, buys so much time. Containment Priest. We have a billion Wraths. They have no real way to interact with Teferi. Super strong for us. Elves, you Wrath them until they lose. The biggest thing in this matchup is you need to play around Coco. Sometimes that means you need to wait until 5 mana to fire off that Foretold Doomskar, so that way you can have something up like a Dovin's Veto in order to counter Coco, or flashing a Containment Priest. Just letting them Coco after you Wrath is a great way to lose. And typically, getting Karn out and actually getting a Sorcerous Spyglass and naming Allosaurus is pretty good. Elvish Warmaster is another one. Those are really your 2 big threats. The onboard mana sinks that pump their team are going to be your biggest threats. Blue-white, most of this is auras. Blue-white auras, your game plan is going to be relatively simple. Early game, stifle their pressure. You have a lot of exile effects, meaning if they don't have an Owl Seed to give their core Spirit Walker or whatever they're suiting up protection, you're going to be able to exile that. You're super far ahead, stall out the game. With Karn, if Karn's under no pressure, you get something like Spyglass. You can name Pup. You can name the Hounds. That gives Indestructible to everything. Otherwise, you just go get Platinum Angel. You slam Platinum Angel, and you just look at your opponent, and the game's over. The rest of these matchups, now you're getting into more niche things. So actually, I will call one specific one. So Mono Black Artifact Ramp is a very, very hard matchup for you because a lot of times you're not going to be able to interact with them. They are going to go ahead and develop a couple pieces of artifact mana, and they're going to go over the top with things like Ulamog. You have no way to really interact with this. You're just kind of going to lose. Your best chance to win versus Mono Black, if it's not aggro and it's the Artifact Ramp deck, is going to be to go ahead and try to get Karn online to shut down some of the Artifact Ramp and then Tutor to slow them down. Honestly, an incredibly hard matchup. Probably not going to win it. Everything else is just kind of a mixed bag here, but against most of the major archetypes, you're actually pretty well positioned. Goblins can be improved. You just need to add things like Grafdigger's Cage, Containment Priest, maybe a couple more counter spells. That's another option here. And against red-green, just go first. Easy enough. But anyway, I have been really happy with this deck's performance so far. I'm probably going to go ahead and try to push for Platinum. We'll see if we can make that happen. But anyways, thank you guys so much for joining me here today. I have been Jay Diesel. Be sure to go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the content. And you can catch me live on Twitch, where I will probably be streaming some more Magic the Gathering along with some other things. But anyways, you guys have an absolutely phenomenal day, and I will talk to you later. Peace out, guys.